Welcome to an experience powered by Pipe TV.
Powered by Pipe TV.
Welcome back. You're watching Pipe TV and you're on stage with Tanja. So we are back with Miss Angeline Butler, and now I've been joined by a few other panelists. I'm going to introduce them. So next to Miss Angeline Butler, we have Anthony Jones. Here we have James Goodwin of the Bare Bones Entertainment. And this lovely lady here is Marcy Novella. The love of our community speaks. She's one of the Pipe TV team members. Thank you all for being here. So, Miss Angeline Butler, I told you that when we came back, we wanted to find out more about you as a teaching artist, also as the performer that you are. So whatever information you could share with us about your life as an entertainer, we'd love to hear it.
Entertainment or no entertainment, I always needed a job. So I feel grateful that I had a lot of skills. And some of the jobs that I had teaching, I really enjoyed. I taught nursery school up in Harlem for a long time. And then I taught in the Guggenheim program arts to teach reading. And so they would bus the students in after school. I love that job, because we were in these $1 million mansions, and we had them all to ourselves. My whole class, they run up and down the stairs, and the kids really had a good time. And let's see, and then I worked with oh my God, so many, Lincoln Center, and their after-school program, and I worked in Los Angeles, acting in the schools through the music center.
Yes.
Yeah, that was really fun too. I played Harry Tubman. Okay. That was fun, going to all the high schools and
Yes.
stuff. So I've always,
Traveling.
education has always been a part of it, because that's my family, my
Yes.
family history.
Yeah.
And I grew up with this group of educators, and I mean, obviously that's a part of me. What they didn't have that I had was they didn't have the performing talents that I had. I mean, all of my sisters, all 6 girls, were given dance lessons. They were given piano lessons. We gave little recitals, in South Carolina. But they didn't take it seriously, and I did.
You got bit by the bug, huh?
Yeah, I did. So performing, the teachers always found me and put me up, and I was always scared to death until I got on stage, and all of a sudden I was real comfortable. Okay, and it's still that way. I'm scared to death until I get on stage, and once I get on stage, the light hits me. I'm a whole different person. That's what my
You're
yeah. And so in college, in high school, I remember in high school at C.A. Johnson High School, I was in a play, and I was one that exposed all of the secret love letters that were supposed to not be, And then I remember when I was at Fisk, I wasn't in the theater department, and I didn't do any plays while I was at Fisk. I only participated in music. But they made me the coloratura with the 100-voice choir.
All right.
I had this high, pure voice, and was too little to be in the Jubilee Singers, because the Jubilee Singers, they all had very big, like Delano Badian, very, very mature voices, because there were only 11 of them, right? So they all had mature voices. So I sang the high coloratura in oratorios, like Carissimi
Now I want to hear
and
something.
Handel, Bach, oratorios and stuff.
Yes.
And then that's when Dr. John Work discovered my ear, that I had this unusual ear. I didn't know what that was, but he went to Juilliard as well. And so did Matthew Kennedy, who was conducting the Jubilee Singers at that point. Now, John W. Work III, who is the one I'm talking about, his father before him was a Jubilee Singer conductor.
Yes.
And then he was, and then eventually Matthew Kennedy was while I was at Fisk. But John W. Work was still teaching counterpoint. He was still teaching harmony, and he was music analysis, okay? And I could do all of that. I could look at any score and tell you from looking at it who wrote it. And, and I could sing the melody, I could read music, I don't know how I learned to do it that well, because I did play the piano and everything, but nobody ever took me serious as a piano player. You know what I mean?
So you didn't get to do much as a piano player?
No, I was doing a lot, but I was never skilled the way real piano players are. But apparently I developed sight reading ability, and I could see and hear the music that I looked at. I could analyze things, okay? And that was my gift, and then I could sing it, okay? And so Dr. Work sent me to Juilliard, and I accomplished what he wanted me to accomplish, which is the scholarship. Now, Juilliard, once you're there, they make you speak French, German, Italian. You have to really, every day, we are studying French, German, Italian, because that's where the repertoire is.
Yeah.
And one of my teachers was Sergius Kagan, who edited all of the international volumes of vocal literature. So we had this class in vocal literature. I think I must have learned 500 songs in French, German, and Italian. Okay?
Wow.
And he gave us a method. Okay. You just don't start singing, and you just don't start playing the piano and singing.
Yes.
You have to deal with the lyric. You have to deal with the poem that was written there, and you've got to translate that poem to English so you make sure you understand the words that you are singing. And then you have to play single-handedly on the piano the melody while you are chanting the lyrics. And when you can do that successfully in the right rhythms and this kind of stuff, only then do you begin to sing.
Yes.
Wow. Okay, most people just think they look at stuff and sing it. Not at Juilliard. Okay. So what? They're training you as an actor too. They're training you as a poet.
Yeah.
They're training you as a translator. They're training you as, just the whole thing. And so I think that that's one of the reasons that I write so much, because of the discipline that they gave me in terms of how you learn a song. Would you believe that? Because I didn't write before I went to Juilliard.
Okay.
And nowadays I write I don't have a problem. I sit down and write when I got an idea, and it just goes,
And you wrote your first play.
I wrote my first play on Rachel and Jackie Robinson, The Smile and Wonder Cycle. It's a epic poetical drama, and we did it. Remember Hazel?
Oh, yeah.
What was the name of that place that she had?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, Hazel had a wonderful place right in front of Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
And it was the arts and culture, and it was a church name. Remember, it was...
was that Hazel Scott?
Yeah, no, Hazel Bryant? Bryant, Hazel Bryant. And Woody King came to this. He said, how come you got so many people here? I did it 4 nights. And the Smile and Wonder Cycle is what it's called.
Yes.
Bill Henry Douglas played the lead. Okay? And I'm still in touch with him. He's down in Washington, D.C. Anyway, it was packed every single night. And I never really published that it was about Jackie Robinson. They discovered that when they came. But for whatever reasons, they were attracted enough to me and what I might do that they showed up.
Yes.
So Woody King asked me, well, how come you got so many people here? He was shocked. I said, well, because if I talk to anybody more than 5 minutes, I always collect their telephone number, their address. You know what I mean? And I made up and then I mail out to people, okay, about what's going on, and they come, and that's how my house was full. Anyway,
It was theater then.
yeah, you know,
promotion for theater.
and you know, it's interesting because that's not the only project I've written about Jackie Robinson. Okay, it's funny. How do I know Jackie Robinson? I was in jail in Miami, 1960 in July. 18 of us got arrested with the Congress on Racial Equality. Remember James Farmer?
Yes.
Well, James Farmer invited the leadership from the different movements, like Florida A&M, Patricia and Priscilla Stevens and all of them, and NYU students that were protesting
Yes.
in support of us, and NSA students, invited the leadership of those groups. So John Lewis, Bernard Lafayette, and myself went and represented Nashville group, because we'd already been in jail twice, okay, at that point.
Y'all were veterans.
Okay, the first charge was trespassing and loitering, and the second charge was conspiracy to obstruct trade and commerce, which was $500 for each one of us in Nashville. 106 students that got arrested. And the guy, we were Dr. Matthew Walker from the Harry Medical School raised $500,000 overnight to get us out of jail, because we had to turn ourselves in, because the governor is the one that sued us for that conspiracy to obstruct trade and commerce. He wanted to make sure we were expelled from school. We never go to back in Nashville again. And he was serious, so the charge was $500. You know, that's more money than we were paying to go to school for a whole year.
I could imagine.
Back then, huh?
Back then, 19, yeah, okay. Now, so I'm in Miami for the Congress on Racial Equality event. And we're not planning to get arrested. We're just down there going to the conference, right? Lafayette always says, well, you know, we didn't really plan to get arrested. You know, Lafayette's still living. He's in Alabama with his wife. And so anyway, I'm up on the 18th floor, or the top floor of the Dade County Jail, with Priscilla and Patricia Stevens, and there's an octagonal window. And the jailer comes around, a female, and she tells us that Jackie Robinson has come to see about us. And well, that's how I made him. I meet him through the octagonal window, and I said, Priscilla, y'all come here. Jackie Robinson's here to come see about us. And he went around to all the jail cells to make sure the students were all right, because he didn't know how they were going to treat us. They charged us with ejection of undesirable guest, which was a mandatory 6 months in jail for going into the Shell City new shopping mall. They had a huge public cafeteria, and we sat in there for 2 days. The second day they arrested us. But it was a 6-month charge that Jackie was interested in, because they hadn't charged anybody like that except for Nashville, the conspiracy thing, and that was on appeal. But anyway, he came to see about us, and then he went away, and then 2 weeks later when we had our trial, he came back. This time he didn't come back alone. He came back with African diplomats.
Wow.
Who came to our trial and in their Paramount Chiefs robes and sat there like and observed the American government. You know?
In Alabama.
Wow.
No, Miami.
In Miami.
Yeah, the American government punishing teenagers. I was 17, John Lewis was 19, Bernard Lafayette was 18, and Bevel was maybe, 20, whatever. Anyway, want to sit him in jail for 6 months for asking to be served in a public cafeteria where you had 40% black population shopping in the mall.
But you couldn't eat there.
Right, couldn't eat there, right. Okay, that's the way it was. Well, they had to note, this Jewish judge, that there was Jackie Robinson in the audience. Okay, anyway, they were so embarrassed, those white people. They gave us 1 year non-reporting probation, provided we didn't get arrested in the state of Florida within that year.
Get arrested.
With no adjudication. Okay. And of course, once we got out, then Jackie, of course, they had like a little banquet for us, and they all fed us, and we got a chance to know him a little better. And then he was in my life until he died. Aww. Years later, he was my first mentor. The first job I ever had in New York City, Rachel and Jackie got that for me, and it was a great job. I was put to work as an usherette with the Carnegie Hall, with the New York Philharmonic, playing 4 concerts on the weekend, and I'm a student at Juilliard. Wow. What a great job. Yeah. Wow. I could take my, after I seat everybody, take my flashlight and sit in the middle of the thing with my scores and study the music. And that's why, and again,
right
you know, I get all right.
Center.
Yeah, Lincoln. No, they were at old Carnegie Hall. The Philharmonic, Leonard Bernstein was at the old Carnegie Hall. They hadn't built Lincoln Center yet. Yeah. But I was in the old Carnegie Hall on what street is that on? 57th Street, right? Yeah, and 7th Avenue. Anyway, Juilliard provided work opportunities for students. And I went and auditioned for the Buster Davis Singers on the Bell Telephone Hour. Anybody remember the Bell Telephone Hour?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They like my high coloratura. Buster Davis hired me. He was happy to get a little black girl singing high like that. And we worked on camera and off camera behind people like Julie Andrews, people like Robert Ryan, Maurice Chevalier, Carol Lawrence, and then in comes Diane Katlow.
Wow.
And I thought she was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen.
She was.
And I looked at her, and I went to her, and I said,
1960.
gee, I want to sing like you. Now, I'm singing high coloratura. That's the highest voice, right? Mm-hmm. I'm not singing in my chest because I don't know how yet.
Yes.
I said, but my goodness, I want to sing like you. And she says, wow, if you want to sing like me, go talk to that guy over there at the piano with the sunglasses on and the cane and the pipe. That's Phil Moore. Wow. Phil Moore trained Lena Horne. Who else?
Marilyn Monroe, right?
Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah.
All those actresses that had a nightclub or supper club act. That's who was there that day. So I went on to Mr. Fillmore, and I said, I talked to Diane, and she told me to come and talk to you. I want to come and study with you. How much you cost? He said, $50 an hour. I said, but I'm only making $125 a week.
I'll take it.
He says, you come on. You know, and that's how I got to study with Fillmore.
Wow.
And that was the beginning of my solo career, because now I'm going to be groomed, right? And the Civil Rights Movement introduced me to an awful lot of people, like Bea Schneiderman in Chicago, okay? She's a very rich woman. She was very much involved with Marshalls and the Field Foundation that was sponsoring the citizenship schools in the South with Septima Poinsett Clark. Mm-hmm. And when I told her that I had the possibility of my first television show, she said, tell Mr. Moore to call me. And she took care of it. I never even asked her how much she had to pay him or whatever, but he got my first act together. And then all of a sudden another guy came on Phil's location from Puerto Rico, Figueroa. And all of a sudden I went from $5 a night to $1,500 a week in the Puerto Rico Sheraton.
Wow.
But I was ready psychologically because I had the support. And I started working television, the nightlife show with William B. Williams and Jan Murray was my first television solo performance. And then Elmer Bernstein, my other mentor, he took me on a daytime show in New York because he wanted me to sing the song that Julie Andrews was going to sing in film, Raggedy Taggedy Little, Raggedy Taggedy Doll, something like that. Anyway, he went to Juilliard, and that was our relationship.
You also did Johnny Carson too, didn't you sing him?
Yeah, but Johnny Carson, I did about 13, 14 Johnny Carson shows, and then I traveled with Johnny on the road. Johnny took me to Westbury Fair, 5,000 people in around. He took me to Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, 22,000 people. He took me to Masonic Temple in Detroit.
Welcome her, please, Angeline Butler. Angeline?
Move over, sun, and give me some sky. I got me some wings, Lord, I'm eager to fly. I may be unknown, but wait till I've gone. You're gonna hear from me. Make me some room. You people out there, on top of the world, I'm gonna meet you, I swear. I'm staking my claim. Remember my name. You're gonna hear from me. Fortune smiled on the road before me. I'm suffering, child. Listen, world, and you can't ignore me. I've got a song that longs to be played. Raise up my flag, begin my parade. Then stop the world over, start coming up closer. That's how it's gonna be. You'll see. You're gonna hear from me.
It's all over.
You know, and the interesting thing was there were two young people on Carson's show, Dick Cavett and me. And then Dick Cavett got his show, and then he took me on his show for 10 performances. And then fired me at the 10th performance because I went back to Johnny Carson. Tell her she went back to Johnny Carson so she can't work on my show. Anyway, then Playboy After Dark, I did maybe 4 of those performances.
Example, in the library, Angeline Butler.
Loving you was all that really mattered. Don't know why you ever went away. God is every joy and inspiration. What's the use in trying to be gay? Even though my every dream is shattered, I keep hoping you'll come back someday. Without me, I thought you cared about me. Where are you? Where's my heart? Where is the dream we started? I can't believe we're parted. Where are you? When we said goodbye, love, what had we to gain? When I gave you my love, was it all in vain? All I through. Must I go on pretending? Where is my happy ending? Where, oh, where are you?
Virginia Graham was often on her show. I mean, I did about 150 television shows, but I was guest artist, never an extra.
Any
Okay.
questions?
You want to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
You know, when it snowballs for you, it just rolls.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And luckily, I had the network that I could support myself, like Phil Moore, like Bea Schneiderman out of Chicago from the Civil Rights Movement. And then I had Elmer Bernstein with me. And he met me when I was working at Jackie Cannon's Rat Fink room. And he and Carolyn Lee came in there when they were writing for How Now Dow Jones, and they liked me and they wanted me to audition for it. And that's where our conversation started. And then I went over there to audition, and guess what I auditioned with?
What?
Goodbye, Charlie. Hate to see you go. Okay. They said,
trying to get
David
something.
Merrick said, man, she must be trying to tell us something. Charlie Blackwell was the production manager. You everybody know Charlie Blackwell?
I know the name, but
Charlie Blackwell was the first black professional production manager on Broadway, black. Nobody knows him.
No.
All those
I've
shows
heard
that
of him.
David
I've heard
Merrick
of him.
and all those people did, Charlie
Yeah.
Blackwell was always the person that was organizing. See, we don't even know our own people, right?
exactly, exactly.
So my life, I worked around the world in my life. When I went on Carson's show, he wanted to know about those sit-ins. So you can imagine Johnny sitting up there making people laugh about, well, when's the next sit-in? It's going to be next week. It's going to be that. He loved it.
Segregation, you just couldn't go into a large department store and take a seat at a lunch counter. And we felt it was a affront to our own dignity, to our own worth. Every Tuesday night, I started attending these nonviolent workshops, and it was there that I met Jim Lawson.
We saw a wrong, and with our bodies, we went into the situation to correct it.
And he kept saying what we could do as students, as young people. He told us all about what Gandhi attempted to do in South Africa.
We were trained in nonviolent direct action, focused on the lunch counters. And that's what our training was about.
The role plan was conditioning us, preparing us, because we were going to face opposition, possibility of us being beaten. We had to be prepared. The first morning that we went downtown to participate in sit-ins, I was assigned to go to Woolworth, and we would go in and take our seats, orderly, peaceful, reading a book, writing a paper, all day. And then we would come back the next day, waiting to be served.
February 13th was our first sit-in Nashville. On this sit-in, we had about 130 kids. I think on this day, many of us didn't realize just how important our movement would grow to be.
The targets of the Nashville students were the lunch counters at the city's 2 largest department stores and 4 variety stores. And for the first time, the community was confronted with Negroes in places where they had never been. During the early weeks of February 1960, the demonstrations that came to be called the sit-in movement exploded across the South. Within a period of 2 months, the movement had spread to 65 cities involving every southern state, with the exception of Mississippi. The new tactic came as a surprise, creating bewilderment and confusion in the white communities.
The white people in Nashville were stunned. I mean, they were more than stunned. Their way of life, they felt, was being disregarded.
But you know, Bob Hope, they tried to get him to hire me. And he said it was communist. It's controversial, and he wouldn't let me go perform with him with the military. So you have all kinds of reaction. But then when I went on Joey Bishop, you know, I looked at Joey Bishop after I sat down, and there came a commercial on with Sally Fields and Marlo Thomas, and Girl Next Door shows. And I looked at Joey Bishop after the commercial, and I said, "Did you see that?" He said, "What?" I said, "Did you see Marlo Thomas and Sally Fields and their shows that, you know, how come we don't have any black people doing shows like comedy, Girl Next Door?"
That girl.
And he waited for 2 minutes, put his head down, and then he raised his head and he said, I think there will be. Then he went to commercial. And then Jack, the comedian, Jack Carter.
Jack Carter, okay.
He says, "You shouldn't have done that. You shouldn't have done that. They're going to stop hiring you." And I said, what a way to go.
Well, on that note, we must have Miss Angeline Butler back. We want to go ahead and add some questions in before we leave the panel. Anthony Jones?
Actually, in your first segment, where it was just you alone, you mentioned Josh White.
Yeah.
I would love to know about your connection to Josh White.
We walked together on that march on Washington.
Yes.
And I'd always loved him as a performer. I'd always seen him in like Greenwich Village when he worked like the Bitter End and this type of thing.
Yes.
So I was very surprised that this was the person I kind of end up with walking from the Lincoln Memorial to Washington Monument. And it was the stories that he told me about, you know, how they had to pay walking taxes, you know, to walk in places like South Carolina on the pavement. The black people couldn't do that. And I never heard of anything like that.
No, very few people have.
Like they made all this stuff up, right?
Yeah, you know, I said, walking taxes? And then, you know, Septima Clark confirmed that with me because when she was a little girl, they couldn't walk on the sidewalks of the College of Charleston. Now, guess what? Her collection is housed where today? The College of Charleston, and they bought up the old building that she used to go to elementary school in.
Wow.
At the Avery Normal Institute. It's the Septima Poinsett Clark collection.
Wow.
It just shows you how times change.
Yes.
So we're going to end this segment on that.
You are now watching Pipe TV.
Hello, we're back. You're watching Pipe TV, and we're on stage with Tanja. We're back with Miss Angeline Butler and our guest, Anthony, Marcy, and John. Did I say it right?
You did not say it right.
Oh, I'm so sorry, James.
James, we're going to do it like that, but we're going to keep it moving. Go right ahead.
So we have questions that are coming from our panelists. Marcy, you can go first.
Miss Butler, I'd like to know your thoughts about the movement. Back in your time, we saw a minority of races, but primarily it was black people that was doing the march. Now today, for example, Black Lives Matter. The people don't look like us. How do you feel about the movement that took place back then and the movement that's going on now?
Well, it's a great question because you got to remember I'm from the South. And our target and what we needed to fight for was very clearly defined. Segregation since 1897.
Ooh.
And we had to figure out how to create better opportunities for ourselves, because when I'm growing up in the 60s, most we could be would be a school teacher. Occasionally someone could be a doctor if they had a chance to get into medical school or a family could afford it, or maybe become a lawyer or whatever. But that talented tenth was like less than 0.5% of the population, okay? You know? Most people would graduate from college and they would have to go back to their home states. And then if they didn't do teaching, or if they didn't preach, or they're going to work on farms, or they're going to do some kind of domesticated work, like in a market, you know, because the corporates were not desegregated, and they're not going to hire you in secretarials, for instance. And if they hire one person, it's going to be 1 or 2 people because of gradualism, no, gradual desegregation. You know, the company putting somebody there for show. Oh, we're not bad, we'll just, but they're not going to like equalize it. Okay, so then we had to move into programs like affirmative action to try to guarantee more inclusion, because what we did wasn't about eating a hamburger, it was about inclusion. And inclusion on the decision-making level, on the sales level, on the developmental level of how you put together the business for the community that you're serving. Because if you've got, in some communities, let's say a 70% black population, you got a Belk's department store, it should be servicing those needs of that 70%.
Yes.
Okay? Not the needs of 20%. Okay? We should have some say in what's being marketed to our community.
Yes.
So we were looking for opportunities like that, but we chose the lunch counters because it was an obvious one where a mother would come with her children and buy Easter clothing and spend all the money at those stores, and yet when the kids were tired, she couldn't even go to a counter in that same store and buy that kid a milkshake. Okay?
So they're marching for something different today than what you were marching for.
Absolutely, because the circumstances have changed. You know, there were still for colored signs up on the toilets, and most of the people that we knew were working, cleaning the floors, you know, cleaning the toilets, you know, cleaning behind the lunch counters, you know. They were not working selling things in the shops, you know. Those were all white people. And so, and then schools was, you know, in the South, like we said, 54 decision had passed, but the states were fighting it. And they had not desegregated all those schools. They'd just begun to do that. Roy Campanella said at the rate they were going in 1960, it was only 6% desegregation in the full South. Now, the decision was in 1954. He said, at that rate, that's 6% in 6 years. It's going to take how much? 94 more years before we desegregate the South. Now, Mississippi was worse than that. Wow. I mean, all the way up in the 80s and stuff like that, they haven't desegregated those schools. Okay? I go to Selma, you know, and we see the documentaries and whatever. And, you know, so it was very clearly defined what we were fighting. Today, we saw the change happen. We saw the change happen where people now could go to colleges, we could pass the college entrance exam boards. They had to be worked on too, because a long time those schools didn't admit us and we couldn't pass those boards. And black people and people of color went all out to get an education. And it's tragic that our white constituents stayed home because they did not want to go to schools that had black people attending. So they were left behind. And that was one, in my estimate, a failure of the civil rights movement, is that we didn't reach back to get those poor white people in there, to get them interested in equalizing their skills so that they too could compete on the job market. We outdid them, okay? And then we started running for elected office, okay? And that was the citizenship schools and that kind of stuff. And we took it serious, voting, okay? You know, my state, South Carolina, was, you know, really working there for a while. But now, come to the other side of it, we got the benefits of us having been sort of integrated there. And now you have a hidden kind of thing going on. People are working with us in public, but when you go to their homes, their relatives and stuff, they still got the same mentality that they had before there was desegregation.
Sorry,
my friends.
Not saying your name properly, James. Do you have a question for Miss Angeline?
No, well, my question is, I would like to actually give her the opportunity because I know of some of her other achievements, and I would definitely love for you to be able to share that with people. Some of your entertainment achievements, some of the covers that you've had opportunity to be on, because you have played an important part. And I always feel that you're never given enough flowers, and I always take that opportunity to give that to you. So could you just please show, because I brag about you all the time. Could you just please show, you know, like your Jet, you on cover of Jet and other things that you have?
Well, you know, the funny thing is that I actually have the distinction of being one of the first black women that did a commercial for Johnson Products. Okay? It was a 2-minute commercial. It was on a special with Della Reese and who was the gentleman that was playing? Lou Ross. Oh. Okay, and H.B. Bonham was the music director. Okay? And in that commercial, which I have actually submitted a copy to Brother Michael, I am 5 different people in 5 different costumes, 5 different hairdos. And they flew a guy out from Chicago to design all of my looks. And I used basically my own clothes because I had a lot of gowns and a lot of pants, suits and stuff for my travels around the world. That's one of the things I'm very proud of, that 2-minute commercial on that Johnson television special, because it was one of the first ones that they sponsored. You didn't know about that.
I didn't know about that. all the time. Did not know about that one. See?
Yeah, and it was only played on that commercial. Okay, I mean on that special that they did, Del Reese and But it would be great if they would somebody look that up and bring it back.
We're gonna
for
find
repeat.
that.
Yeah,
We're gonna find that and bring that back.
Anyway.
Yes.
It used to be the same old cold,
Jerry Butler. Remember, you can be any woman you want to be just by changing your hairstyle. And you can change it as easily as you change your mind. When your hair is relaxed with Ultra Sheen Permanent Cream Relaxer. Ultra Sheen also makes cream satin press, conditioner and hairdress, cream shampoo, rinse and set, which are sold wherever you buy cosmetics. Ultra Sheen. It does for your hair what love does for your heart.
One of the other things I was really proud of was my work with Duke Ellington. I met him on The Tonight Show. And I did not know who he was. Because in South Carolina, we're not into jazz.
That's true.
We're into church music.
Okay.
And we had some rock and rollers, like, some of the guys come through there, and maybe if we're lucky as a teenager, one of our fickle boyfriends took us to a nightclub. We couldn't tell daddy, right? Anyway. So maybe James Brown I knew about, and maybe Little Richard, okay? But I did not know who Duke Ellington was. I knew who Elvis Presley was, okay? And that's in the rock idiom, okay? But we did not know who, Count Basie was, and we didn't know Ella Fitzgerald. Wow. That music wasn't played, to us. Even in high school, it wasn't played to us. So I first found jazz one weekend after we had been arrested, and they had that $500 charge on us. And the sit-ins, that ejection of, no, not that one, the conspiracy to obstruct trade and commerce. We took a weekend at the Highlander Folk School as a retreat because we needed to take a break because we've been getting these nightly bomb threats at dormitories and the whole number. So we decided to just kind of get out of town for a minute. And on that weekend, I met Rosa Parks, Edie Nixon. I met Bernice Robinson. I met, I met, they were all in Holland. They came over there to see us, okay? We went over to take a break. But on that weekend, the Dave Brubeck Quartet was playing at the University of the South, which is a rich boys' university up in Monteagle, Tennessee area. And they couldn't stay on campus because they had Eugene Wright with them, the bass player. Okay, so they had to put him up at Highlander. And then I met Eugene Wright, and he kept me up all night talking about who are you. And he stayed in my life until he died a few years ago. But that was my first jazz musician that I met, and also Paul became a great friend of mine. I used to go to his apartment, and he would sit down and play Purcell with me singing opera.
That's what I want to hear. I want to hear that. Can we get a sound
That's
out of
Paul
you?
Desmond we were talking about, right? Take Five?
Yes.
He wrote that, right? But anyway, that was a big hit for him and the Brubeck Quartet. But that's the first jazz group that I knew. The second one that I met was Joe Williams. I used to walk from Carnegie Hall every night, after I get off the subway, and I lived on the Lower East Side, and I'd go across 8th Street, and then there was Joe Williams playing at this club. And I would peek in there, but I couldn't go in there, and he sometimes would be outside smoking a cigarette. So I got to talking to him, when I'd be walking home at night. And one night he took me inside, and he said, "Now don't worry about them," because it was a gay bar. He says, "I bring out their masculinity." Anyway, so I was on stage with Joe singing Summertime. We did Summertime together. It's the first time I ever sang with Joe Williams. Okay, and he stayed in my life until he died. Okay, I was even there for his second wedding that he had in New York. And it was, anyway, when I was on these shows, the daytime shows, the serials, sometimes I go over to Joe's place and watch him, and he said, there she go.
Did you have a question, Anthony?
We learned too much.
Yeah, I'm about to hear about the nighttime action. She keep it up. I'm going to hear about what was going on after the after.
Well, you got to go home and got to go to work. I had to go to school.
Yeah.
I was working and I was going to school.
Wow.
So I didn't have a lot of time. That's why I'm talking to Joe on the street. Okay? Because I'm on my way home. You know what I mean? I'm not hanging out late night.
You have another question?
Yeah, during the break we spoke on your familiarity with Frank Silvera.
Yeah, Frank Silvera.
Which I thought was wonderful. Here in New York, we celebrate Frank Silvera all throughout the theater.
But I knew him in California.
Yes, yes.
And I was in his class out there.
And you were saying about some of the people who were
well, B.
also in your
Richards,
class.
Maya Angelou came to our class. Max Julian.
Max Julian, yes.
And, just... Yaphet, Kodo, and, all the heavyweights. Came to Frank Silvera's class, and he was in a huge sort of a schoolroom that was very, very nice. And me, I was kind of an observer because those are heavyweights, you know what I mean? So I was learning a lot just sort of hanging around there,
But I think most people don't realize how many films Frank Silvera was actually in.
Oh, wow,
and
was he in
because
a lot
of
of
his
films.
complexion, a lot of people mistake him
For Mexican.
Yes.
Yeah. Because they definitely cast him that way, yeah. No, great actor, great person. And there was terrible tragedy the way he died with the electricity from his refrigerator.
Yeah.
He was cleaning out his refrigerator, got electrocuted,
Yeah.
Yeah. But, ask me something.
What was your greatest moment on stage? Like, what is it that it's like, if you could go and relive that moment again, where would that be?
Seeing Josephine Baker at the Broadhurst Theater.
Wow. And what year was that?
Oh my goodness, I was working as an actor. I was working at Carnegie Hall as an usherette. I was still a Juilliard. And because you're an usherette, the other ushers from other places know you're an usher.
Yeah.
And so they let you in free.
Yes.
So I went to all of her performances every night.
Wow.
That should have been exciting. So seeing Josephine Baker then was like seeing maybe who today? No one?
No one. There's nobody like that.
There's nobody.
She was the whole show. And those Europeans, they know how to create different characters in the shows and stuff like that, and how to dress somebody and how not to waste time. Like, for instance, there's a show right now on Zora Neale Hurston that's going around to different colleges, okay? And there's an actress that had a perfectly wonderful script written by Lawrence Holder.
Yeah.
Great script. But she spends so much time in between every scene that you lose interest in the play.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Josephine Baker.
I've seen it.
When she wasn't on stage, somebody was dancing. Somebody was doing something. You understand?
Yeah.
And people don't realize how talented she was. You know she used to sing opera?
I know that.
Do you know that Josephine Baker played at major opera houses in Europe? With people like Marian Anderson in the audience. And she played Offenbach. They taught her. You understand? She never had that background. She was a little dancing girl that was, she was Bessie Smith's maid, helping her with her costumes. Josephine, wow, she took in everything that was around her. And when she went to Europe, those guys had to train her in everything that she had done. She was dancing with Catherine Dunham, but she was kind of loose-legged and dancing, But she never had the training. Let's say I had a Juilliard, or never any of that formal
So
kind
natural.
of training. She was a natural, man. And she sang opera, and she was beautiful. Her voice was very, very beautiful. And that's why they always say she couldn't sing.
Okay, I understand that. I understand.
Because she wasn't singing jazz.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, I'd like to get each one of you, if you all have a social media tag or to let the audience know how to connect with you.
Marcy Novella on all major platforms.
Same thing, me. Bare Bones Entertainment on all major platforms.
You can check me out on Pipe TV.
Well, if you go on John Jay College for Criminal Justice website and it says, faculty and staff, check out Angeline Butler, Butler at jj.cuny.edu.
And you, Anthony?
And they'll pass it on.
Okay. So again, we want to thank everybody for showing up and showing some love here today with Pipe TV family and our guest. Again, you're watching Pipe TV and you're on stage with Tanja.